The whole town hails you as a savior, but only you know the truth. The hands that once saved children are the same hands that gripped the reins fleeing a bank robbery. Will you stay silent or confess?" The morning bell rang 8 times across Millfield's frost-touched roofs, each chime sharp as a hammer strike on iron. Sarah Brennan pulled her woolen coat tighter and stepped through the schoolhouse door, morning light catching the brass nameplate. "Miss S. Brennan, teacher." Her boots clicked against the pine floor as 23 children rose from their benches. "Good morning, Miss Brennan," they chorused. "Good morning, scholars. Please be seated." The folded marriage paper crinkled in her coat pocket as she hung the garment on its peg. 3 years she'd carried Thomas Mitchell's proposal, unsigned and undelivered. The document bore his careful script: "To Miss Sarah Catherine Brennan, in the matter of matrimonial intentions, this 14th day of October, 1887. Young Emma Hartwell raised her hand. "Miss Brennan, will you tell us again about the fire?" Sarah's fingers found the yellowed postcard in her desk drawer, a habit now, like checking a wound. Kansas City's skyline etched in sepia, the familiar handwriting on the back. "Coming home soon. All my love, J." The postmark read the 12th of September, 1887. Jacob's last word before vanishing into whatever darkness had swallowed him. "The grain elevator fire was 2 years past, Emma. We've discussed it enough." Sarah arranged the morning's lessons across her desk. "Today we study arithmetic. Mr. Peterson's wheat sold for 67 cents per bushel yesterday. If he harvested 400 bushels—" "But you saved 12 people," Tommy Larson interrupted. "My pa says you're a hero." The word sat heavy in the room. Hero. As if courage could wash clean what came before. "Heroes don't seek praise," Sarah replied, turning to the slate-board. "They simply do what needs doing." Through the west window she watched the morning stage roll down Main Street, wheels throwing up small clouds of dust. The Dakota and Western locomotive sat at the depot, black smoke curling from its stack. A passenger stepped down from the rear car tall, wearing a grey coat and dark hat pulled low. Something in his posture made her fingers tighten on the chalk. The bell tower chimed the quarter hour. 15 minutes past 8. Time always ticking forward, never back. "Miss Brennan?" Emma's voice seemed distant. "Are you well?" Sarah blinked, returning to the classroom's warmth. "Quite well, thank you. Now, about Mr. Peterson's wheat." But her gaze drifted again to the window where the stranger had paused beside the depot's water tower. He lifted his face toward the schoolhouse, and for one terrible moment she thought she recognized the line of his jaw, the way he held his shoulders. The marriage paper rustled as she moved. Thomas Mitchell would expect an answer soon. A good man, steady as Dakota soil, patient as harvest seasons. The kind of man who deserved better than a woman with shadows trailing behind her like smoke. The postcard's edges had worn soft from handling. Jacob's promise, 3 years old, coming home soon. But some departures were permanent, some sins beyond redemption. The stranger turned away, walking east toward the church. Sarah released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Now then," she said, chalk poised against slate, "if Mr. Peterson's 400 bushels brought 67 cents each—" The bell struck 9 as Sarah dismissed the children for their morning recess. They scattered into the crisp air like leaves before wind, their laughter bright against the approaching grey clouds. She remained at her desk, grading arithmetic problems, the folded marriage paper heavy in her coat pocket. A shadow fell across the doorway. Miss Brennan. She looked up to find Sheriff Tom Watson, his badge catching the light. Behind him stood the stranger from the depot, closer now. She could see the weathered lines around his eyes, the silver threading his dark beard. "Good morning, Sheriff." Her voice remained steady, though her pulse quickened. "How may I help you?" "This gentleman's asking after you. Says you might know each other from back east." The stranger stepped forward, removing his hat. Grey eyes met hers eyes she'd once known better than her own reflection. "Hello, Sarah." The chalk slipped from her fingers, clattering to the floor. "Jacob." Sheriff Watson excused himself, leaving them alone. A brother alive, older, carrying prison and distance in the lines of his face, stood where she had tried to build a new life. "You look well," he said. "You look older. Why are you here?" "The same reason as always, looking for home." She pointed to the yellowed postcard in her drawer. 3 years without a word. "I was in federal prison. Bank job in Topeka 2 years. Before that, hiding." Her stomach clenched. She had suspected. Now it was truth. "I'm not running any more," she said. "I'm Sarah Brennan, schoolteacher. The one they call a hero." Jacob glanced toward the playground. "And when they learn what we did in Kansas City?" Silence fell heavy. That night robbery, the gun, her hands on the reins still haunted her. "That was 3 years ago," she whispered. "Have you changed, or just grown better at pretending?" He placed a letter on her desk, her own handwriting, unsent, meant for their mother. She pushed it back. "She's dead to me." "Maybe. But forgiveness isn't about the other person." Then Jacob's voice softened. "The guard, William Morrison, he didn't die. He lived. The bank lied for insurance." Her breath caught. 3 years of guilt, 3 years believing herself a murderer built on a lie. But before she could respond, the schoolhouse door burst open. Tommy Larson stumbled inside, blood streaming from his nose. "Miss Brennan, Emma fell in the well." Sarah ran harder than she had since Kansas City, her skirts tangling around her legs as she raced toward the old well behind Peterson's wheat field. Jacob kept pace beside her, his longest stride eating up the frozen ground. Behind them, Tommy's sobs provided a desperate soundtrack to their sprint. The other children clustered around the stone-lined hole, their faces white with fear. "She was trying to get the ball," young Michael Peterson explained. It bounced over the edge, and Emma leaned too far. Sarah dropped to her knees beside the well's mouth. 20 feet down, Emma Hartwell clung to a jutting stone, her blue dress already soaked through. The well's water had risen with the autumn rains another foot, and Emma would lose her grip. "Emma, can you hear me? Miss Brennan?" The child's voice echoed up from the depths, thin with cold and terror. "I can't hold on much longer." "Yes, you can. You're the bravest girl in Dakota." Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. The well was too narrow for a grown person, the sides too slick with moss and morning frost. "I'm going to get you out." Jacob knelt beside her, peering into the darkness. "Rope?" "Peterson's barn." She turned to Tommy. "Run to Mr. Peterson's house. Tell him we need his longest rope and his block and tackle. Fast as you can." Tommy sprinted away, his short legs pumping. The other children pressed closer, their breathing sharp in the cold air. "Miss Brennan," Emma called weakly. "My hands are slipping." Sarah looked around desperately, then began unlacing her boots. "Jacob, help me." "What are you doing?" "Going down." She pulled off her coat, feeling the marriage paper crumple in the pocket. "I'm small enough to fit, and Emma trusts me. It's too dangerous." "So is Kansas City. But we did what we had to do then, and I'm doing what I have to do now." Jacob's hands stilled on the rope they were fashioning from coat sleeves and petticoats. "Sarah, number." She met his eyes, and in that moment the weight of 3 years' guilt lifted from her shoulders. "I know who I am now. Not the woman who ran from Kansas City, not the hero they made me into after the fire. I'm the woman who saves children because it's right, because they matter more than my fear." She wrapped the makeshift rope around her waist and swung her legs over the well's edge. The stone was ice-cold against her stockings, but Emma's frightened breathing rose from below, and that was all that mattered. "When Peterson gets here with the real rope, pull us both up," she told Jacob. "And if I don't make it—" "You will. If I don't, tell them the truth about Kansas City. All of it. They deserve to know who they're mourning." She began her descent, feet finding purchase on the slick stones. The well walls closed around her like a tomb, but Emma's presence below provided warmth against the darkness. This was belonging not the lies she'd built her reputation on, but the simple choice to risk everything for a child's life. Halfway down, her foot slipped. For a terrifying moment she swung free, the makeshift rope burning her hands. Above her, Jacob's voice called down, "I've got you! Keep going!" She found the wall again, continued down. Emma's fingers were white with cold when Sarah reached her, the child's small body shaking with effort and fear. "I'm here," Sarah whispered, wrapping one arm around Emma's waist. "Hold tight to me." "I knew you'd come," Emma breathed. "You always save people." The words cut deeper than any accusation. This child's faith, unshakable and pure, built not on Sarah's lies, but on her choices. The grain elevator fire hadn't been about heroism. It had been about doing what needed doing, just as this was. Above them, Peterson's voice boomed down the well. "Ropes ready! Hook's coming down!" The rescue took 20 minutes that felt like hours. First Emma, then Sarah hauled up from the darkness into blessed daylight. The children cheered as Emma emerged, wet and shivering but whole. Sarah followed, her stockings torn and her hands raw, but her heart lighter than it had been in 3 years. Mrs. Hartwell arrived as they were wrapping Emma in Peterson's coat, her face wild with terror. "Emma! Oh, my baby!" "Miss Brennan saved me, Mamma," Emma said through chattering teeth. "She came down in the well just for me." Mrs. Hartwell looked at Sarah with tears streaming down her face. "How can I ever repay you?" Sarah glanced at Jacob, who stood watching from beside Peterson's wagon. The marriage paper lay soggy and forgotten somewhere at the bottom of the well, but the yellowed postcard remained in her desk drawer. Some debts could be forgiven. Some truths needed telling. "Just take care of her," Sarah said. "That's payment enough." But as they loaded Emma into Peterson's wagon for the ride to Doc Harrison's, Sarah felt the weight of her choices settling around her like a familiar coat. The hero's mantle she'd worn since the grain elevator fire, the teacher's authority she'd built from half-truths, all of it would have to be examined now, with Jacob's presence forcing her to confront who she really was. The well had nearly claimed one innocent life today. But it had also washed away something else, the last of Sarah's illusions about her ability to bury the past. As the wagon rolled toward town, Jacob fell into step beside her. "Still planning to tell me to leave?" She looked at him, her brother, her mirror, her judge, and felt the first stirring of something that might eventually become forgiveness. "Stay for supper," she said. "We have a lot to talk about." The bell tower marked 2 o'clock as Sarah walked back to the schoolhouse, her wet skirts heavy against her legs. The children had been dismissed early. Emma's rescue had shaken them all, and she needed time to think before facing them again tomorrow. Jacob walked silently beside her, his presence both comfort and threat in the autumn air. "The marriage paper," she said, as they reached the schoolhouse steps. "It's gone. At the bottom of Peterson's well with my good sense." "Thomas Mitchell's proposal?" Jacob held the door for her. "How long have you been carrying it?" 3 years. Same as your postcard." She moved to her desk, pulled out the yellowed Kansas City card. The edges were soft as cloth now, the writing faded but still legible. "I kept thinking if I waited long enough, if I became good enough, the past would matter less." Jacob studied the classroom, the neat rows of desks, the alphabet cards along the walls, the children's drawings tacked beside the window. "This is good work, Sarah. Teaching, saving lives. Whatever happened in Kansas City, you've balanced the scales." "Have I?" She sank into her chair, exhaustion finally catching up with her. "Or have I just been hiding behind other people's gratitude?" Through the window she could see preparations beginning for tomorrow's church, social tables being carried from the schoolhouse to the yard, bunting strung between the elm trees. Mrs. Hartwell would be there with Emma, probably wanting to thank Sarah again. The whole town would turn out, eager to celebrate their hero's latest rescue. "There's something else," Jacob said, "about why I came back." The tone of his voice made her look up. "What?" He reached into his coat and withdrew a folded paper, not yellowed like the postcard, but crisp and official. Federal warrant. "For bank robbery in Kansas City, September 1887. They're still looking for you, Sarah, both of us." The world seemed to tilt. "But you said the guard didn't die." "He didn't. But the bank's insurance company hired Pinkertons to investigate. They know about the false death claim now, and they've connected it to our robbery. Someone in Leavenworth talked, probably Morrison's brother, looking for reward money." Sarah stared at the warrant. Her name printed in stark black ink. Sarah Catherine Brennan, aged 22, Wanted for armed robbery and conspiracy to defraud. The paper trembled in her hands. How long do we have? Agent named Crawford's, maybe 2 days behind me. 3 if we're lucky. She thought of Emma at the bottom of the well, trusting completely that Sarah would save her. Of Tommy Larson's proud smile when he mastered long division. Of Mrs. Peterson bringing fresh bread every Friday, payment for Sarah's help with her letters. "I can't run again," she said. "You have to. They'll hang us both." She set the warrant aside and pulled Thomas Mitchell's backup proposal from her desk drawer. He'd given her 2 copies. Practical man that he was. "I won't spend my life running from something we didn't do. We robbed a bank, Sarah. That part we did. Because we were starving. Because winter was coming and we had nothing." The memories rushed back. Kansas City's brutal poverty, their mother's death, the desperate choices that had led them to that terrible night. We made mistakes. But we're not the same people who made them. Jacob moved to the window, watching the social preparations. Those people out there, they think they know you. What happens when they learn the truth? Then they learn the truth. She stood, moving to stand beside him. "I'm tired of lies, Jacob. Tired of carrying everyone else's version of who I should be." A knock at the door interrupted them. Sheriff Watson stepped inside, his expression troubled. "Afternoon, folks. Miss Brennan. There's a federal agent asking questions down at the hotel. Says he's investigating some old business from Kansas City." Sarah's pulse quickened, but she kept her voice steady. "What sort of questions?" "About you and your brother here. Banking matters, he says." Watson's eyes flicked between them. "Anything I should know about?" This was the moment, the choice between more lies and dangerous truth. Sarah looked at Jacob, saw her own decision reflected in his eyes. "Yes," she said, "there's something you should know." She told him everything. The bank robbery, the God who lived, the 3 years of guilt and running. Jacob added details: the Pinkerton investigation, the approaching agent, the warrant that would see them both in federal prison or worse. Watson listened without interruption, his weathered face growing graver with each revelation. When she finished, silence filled the schoolhouse like snow. "Well," the sheriff said finally, "that's quite a story. It's the truth. I believe you." He adjusted his hat, thinking. "This Agent Crawford, he's planning to arrest you both?" "Tomorrow, most likely," Jacob said. "Maybe tonight." Watson nodded slowly. "Then we'd best get ready for him." Sarah blinked. "We? Miss Brennan, you saved 12 people from the grain elevator fire. Today you risked your life for little Emma Hartwell. I've seen your character tested, and I know what I found." He moved toward the door. "Federal agents are fine for federal crimes. But this is Dakota territory, and you're our people now." After he left, Sarah and Jacob sat in the growing twilight, the weight of revelation settling around them like dust after a storm. "Think he'll really stand with us?" Jacob asked. Sarah touched the empty space in her pocket where the marriage paper used to rest. Tomorrow would bring Agent Crawford and whatever justice he carried. But tonight, for the first time in 3 years, she felt something she'd almost forgotten, the possibility of home. "I think," she said, "we're about to find out what kind of people we've become." Outside, the bell tower chimed 5 times. The social would begin at 6 tables full of food, families gathered together, children playing in the elm tree's shade. Her community, built on shared struggles and mutual care. Whatever came next, she would face it here, as Sarah Brennan, not the hero they'd made her, but the woman she'd chosen to become. The storm clouds that had been gathering all day finally opened, sending rain against the schoolhouse windows like scattered coins. Tomorrow would dawn clear or cloudy, but it would dawn on truth instead of lies. That had to count for something. The church bell struck 7 as Agent Crawford dismounted in front of the schoolhouse. Sarah watched from the window as he tied his horse to the hitching post, a compact man in a dark suit, his movements precise and purposeful. Behind him, the church social continued in defiant normalcy. Families gathered around quilts spread on the grass. Children chasing fireflies in the gathering dusk. Mrs. Peterson's fiddle adding sweetness to the evening air. "Time to go," Jacob said. rising from the desk where he'd been writing his own confession, a companion to the letter Sarah had addressed to the town. Number Sarah remained at the window. "We face this here." The door opened without ceremony. Crawford entered, followed by Sheriff Watson and 2 men. Sarah didn't recognize federal marshals by their bearing. Crawford's eyes swept the classroom, taking in the alphabet cards, the children's drawings, the evidence of a life built on teaching instead of taking. "Sarah Catherine Brennan," Crawford said, producing a set of iron shackles. "Jacob Samuel Brennan. By authority of the federal government, you're under arrest for bank robbery, conspiracy, and fraud. Agent Crawford." Sarah stepped forward, her hands steady despite the tremor in her chest. "Before you do what you came to do, I'd like the people of this town to hear the truth. From me." Crawford consulted his pocket watch. "You'll have plenty of time to talk in federal court." "She'll have time to talk now," Sheriff Watson said, his hand resting on his gun. "This is still my jurisdiction, Agent. The lady's earned the right to speak." Crawford's eyes narrowed. "Are you interfering with federal law, Sheriff?" "I'm ensuring it's applied fairly." Watson nodded toward the window. "Miss Brennan's got friends out there. Good people who deserve to know what's happening to their schoolteacher." Sarah looked through the glass at the social at Emma Hartwell, recovered from her well-adventure, helping her mother serve pie, at Tommy Larson, showing off his new arithmetic skills to anyone who'd listen, at Thomas Mitchell, standing alone beside the church steps, still waiting for an answer to his proposal. "All right," Crawford said after a moment. 5 minutes. Then the prisoners come with me." Sarah walked to the door, Jacob beside her. The evening air carried the scent of Mrs. Peterson's apple cobbler, the sound of children's laughter, the warm murmur of community at peace. She thought of the grain elevator fire, of Emma in the well, of all the small choices that had led her here. "Friends," she called, her voice carrying across the churchyard. "Neighbors, I need to tell you something." The conversation stilled. Fiddle music faded. Faces turned toward the schoolhouse faces she'd come to know as well as her own reflection. Mrs. Hartwell with Emma on her lap. The Peterson family gathered around their quilt. The Larson boys, sticky with candy and bright with excitement. "My name is Sarah Catherine Brennan," she began. 3 years ago in Kansas City, my brother and I robbed a bank." The words fell into silence like stones into still water. Someone gasped Mrs. Peterson, maybe, or young Mrs. Larson. Thomas Mitchell took a step forward, his face pale in the lamplight. Sarah continued, her voice gaining strength. "We were hungry and desperate, and we made a terrible choice. A guard was shot, not killed as we thought, but wounded. We fled, believing ourselves murderers. I came here to hide from what we'd done." Emma Hartwell slipped from her mother's lap, moving closer to the schoolhouse steps. Her small face was serious, but not afraid. "Miss Brennan?" "Yes, Emma? Are you still going to be my teacher?" The question pierced Sarah's heart. Such simple faith from a child who had no reason to trust her. "I don't know, sweetheart. That's not my choice any more." Crawford stepped forward impatiently. "Time's up." But Sheriff Watson raised his hand. "Let her finish." Sarah looked at her community, her people scattered across the churchyard, like seeds on fertile ground. "I've spent 3 years trying to earn forgiveness for what I thought I was. Today I learned that some of what I believed about Kansas City was wrong, but not all of it. I did rob that bank. I did break the law. I did run when I should have stayed to face the consequences." Thomas Mitchell moved closer, his expression unreadable. "What are you saying, Sarah?" "I'm saying I'm sorry. For the lies, for the deception, for letting you believe I was someone I wasn't." She pulled out the letter she'd written, holding it like a white flag. "But I'm also saying that the woman who taught your children, who pulled them from the grain elevator fire, who went down that well today for Emma, that woman is real too. She's who I became here, with your help." Mrs. Hartwell stood, Emma's small hand in hers. "What happens now?" Crawford answered before Sarah could speak. "Federal prison, both of them. 20 years minimum for bank robbery." A murmur ran through the crowd, anger, surprise, fear, but not the rejection Sarah had expected. Instead, she saw something else in their faces. the stubborn loyalty of people who'd claimed her as their own. 20 years for stealing money to eat, Mrs. Peterson said, her voice sharp with indignation. While the bank steals from honest farmers every day and calls it interest. The law doesn't make exceptions for hunger, Crawford replied. Maybe it should. This from Thomas Mitchell, stepping fully into the lamplight. Sarah, do you have anything else to say? She looked at him, good, steady Thomas, who deserved a wife without shadows trailing behind her. Only that I understand if you can't forgive me, any of you. Forgive you? Emma Hartwell broke free from her mother's grip, running to Sarah's side. You saved my life today. You save lives. That's what heroes do. Heroes don't rob banks, child, Crawford said coldly. Heroes do what's right, Emma replied with 8-year-old certainty, even when it's scary. Sarah knelt beside the girl, tears threatening for the first time since Crawford's arrival. Thank you, Emma, for everything. The agent moved forward with his shackles, but found his path blocked by an unexpected obstacle. Mrs. Peterson, all 4 feet 10 inches of her, standing firm as Dakota bedrock. You'll not be taking our teacher, she announced. Not without a fight. This is federal law, ma'am. This is our community. Thomas Mitchell moved to stand beside Mrs. Peterson, and Sarah Brennan is part of it. Others joined them, Sheriff Watson, the Hartwells, the Larson family, even old Mr. Kowalski from the grain mill. A wall of people between Sarah and the agent, united not by lies, but by something deeper, the bonds forged through shared struggle and mutual care. Stand aside, Crawford ordered. All of you, or I'll arrest you for obstruction. Then you'd better bring more shackles, Watson said calmly. Sarah stood, her heart full of wonder and pain in equal measure. These people, her people, willing to risk federal charges for someone who'd deceived them. She thought of the marriage paper at the bottom of Peterson's well, of the yellowed postcard in her desk, of all the ways she'd tried to earn a belonging she'd had all along. No, she said, stepping forward. Thank you, but no. The crowd turned to her, confused. Emma tugged at her skirt. Miss Brennan? I won't let you face punishment for my choices. Sarah looked at each face in turn, memorizing them against the long darkness ahead. Agent Crawford is right. I broke the law. I have to answer for it. She held out her hands for the shackles. But I want you to know, all of you, that these 3 years in Millfield have been the best of my life. You taught me what home really means. Not hiding from who you were, but growing into who you could become. Crawford fastened the iron around her wrists. The metal was cold, but the warmth of her community's love still surrounded her like a cloak. Jacob, she said to her brother, your turn. But before Jacob could step forward, the church bell began to ring, not the measured chimes that marked the hours, but the rapid, urgent clanging that meant only one thing, fire. Everyone turned toward the sound. On the horizon, orange light flickered against the darkening sky, the grain elevator again. Dear God, Sheriff Watson breathed. Not again. Crawford hesitated, key in hand. The federal law that bound him wrestled with the human need to help. Around the churchyard, people gathered their children, preparing to rush toward the fire. Agent Crawford, Sarah said quietly, people are going to die if we don't help them. You can arrest us after. He stared at her for a long moment, seeing something in her face that made his decision for him. The key turned in the lock. The shackles fell to the ground with a dull clank. You have until the fire's out, he said. Then we finish this. Sarah rubbed her wrists, feeling the blood return to her fingers. Around her the community mobilized with practiced efficiency, men running for buckets and shovels, women gathering medical supplies, children being hustled to safety. Miss Brennan, Emma Hartwell, called. Will you save them again? Sarah looked at the orange glow on the horizon, then back at the child's trusting face. We all will, Emma, together. She ran toward the fire with her community beside her, free for perhaps the last time in 20 years. But freedom, she realized, had never been about iron shackles or federal warrants. It was about choosing who to become in the moments that mattered most. The grain elevator blazed against the night sky, but Sarah Brennan ran toward it anyway, carrying the love of her people like a torch in the darkness. The grain elevator stood like a pillar of fire against the Dakota night, flames licking 60 feet into the air. Sarah ran beside Thomas Mitchell and Sheriff Watson, their boots pounding against the frozen ground. Behind them came the rest of Millfield farmers with buckets, women with bandages, children herded to safety by Mrs. Peterson's stern commands. The heat hit them 200 yards away, a wall of air that singed eyebrows and stole breath. Through the flames, Sarah could see figures trapped on the elevator's second floor, 3 men silhouetted against the orange hell, their voices lost in the fire's roar. "Same as before," Sheriff Watson shouted over the noise. Fire caught the grain dust, went up like a torch. "Who's trapped?" Sarah called back. "Morrison brothers and young Pete Kowalski. They were working late, trying to get the last shipment ready for tomorrow's train." The name Morrison hit Sarah like a physical blow. The guard from Kansas City, William Morrison, had a brother here in Millfield. The man whose supposed death had haunted her dreams now had family trapped in the flames she was running toward. Agent Crawford appeared at her elbow, his federal authority forgotten in the face of immediate need. "The stairs are gone. How did you get them out last time?" "Ladder from Peterson's barn," Thomas Mitchell answered. "But that won't reach the second floor." Sarah studied the building's structure through the flames. The grain chute on the north side might still be intact, a narrow metal tube that carried wheat from the upper floors to the loading dock. Dangerous, but possible. "The chute," she called to Watson. "Can we rig a rope down it?" "Too narrow for a man, too steep for safety." Watson's face was grim in the firelight. "You'd have to be crazy to try it." Sarah looked up at the trapped men, then back at her community gathered in the orange glow. Emma Hartwell stood beside her mother, small hands pressed to her mouth. Thomas Mitchell watched Sarah with knowing eyes, understanding what she was about to do, accepting it as part of who she was. "Crazy's gotten me this far," she said. Jacob appeared with coiled rope from Peterson's wagon. "I'm going with you." "Number?" Sarah took the rope, testing its strength. "1 person less weight, better chance." "Sarah, someone needs to work the rope from down here." She looked at her brother, her partner in crime, her fellow refugee, her family. "I need you to pull me up when I come back down." Agent Crawford stepped forward. "Miss Brennan, if you die in there, my investigation dies with you." "Then I'd better not die." She kissed Emma Hartwell's forehead, squeezed Thomas Mitchell's hand, and walked toward the inferno. The grain chute entrance was barely 2 feet wide, its metal sides already hot enough to burn through cloth. Sarah tied the rope around her waist and began her climb into the heart of the fire. The first 10 feet were the worst heat that seared her lungs, smoke that turned the world into a gray nightmare. But she climbed anyway, hand over hand up the narrow chute, driven by something stronger than fear, the knowledge that 3 men would die if she failed. Halfway up, her skirt caught fire. She beat out the flames with her bare hands, feeling the sting of burns but not stopping. Below her, she could hear the crowd shouting encouragement, their voices a lifeline in the darkness. The chute opened into a hellscape. The second floor was a maze of flame and falling timber, the air so thick with smoke it was like breathing soup. Through the chaos, she could see the Morrison brothers and Pete Kowalski huddled against the far wall, their clothes singed, their faces black with soot. "Here," she called. "This way." The 3 men stumbled toward her voice. Pete Kowalski, barely 18, reached her first. She tied the rope around his waist, shouting instructions he couldn't hear over the fire's roar. A push, a prayer, and he disappeared down the chute toward safety. The rope came back up. John Morrison next, older, heavier, fighting panic as she secured the line around him. "Tell my brother I'm sorry," she gasped, not knowing if he could hear her. He vanished into the chute. 2 down, 1 to go. But when the rope returned, part of the ceiling chose that moment to collapse. Burning timber crashed between Sarah and the remaining Morrison brother, cutting off their escape route. The chute entrance was blocked, the stairs were gone, and the fire was spreading faster than hope. Through the flames she could see Thomas Morrison, William's brother, the man whose family had paid the price for her crimes. He was injured, clutching his arm where a burning beam had struck him. "Can you move?" she called. "Arm's broke, I think." His voice was steady despite the pain. "Go on. Save yourself." Sarah looked at the blocked chute, then at the man she'd wronged without knowing it. 3 years of guilt crystallized into a single moment of choice. She could try to clear the debris, might even make it. Or she could stay with Thomas Morrison and face whatever came together. She stayed. "What are you doing?" Morrison asked as she moved to his side. "What I should have done 3 years ago." She helped him sit against the wall, using her body to shield him from falling sparks. "I'm Sarah Brennan. My brother and I robbed the bank where your brother worked. We thought we'd killed him." Recognition dawned in Morrison's smoke-stained face. "You're the ones William talks about, the bank robbers he can't forget." "He lived?" "More than lived. Used the reward money to buy a farm in Kansas. Got married last spring." Morrison coughed, pain evident in every line of his body. "Says that night changed his life, made him realize how precious it was." The irony was bitter as smoke. Her guilt over a man she'd never killed, while his brother found redemption in the very crime that had damned her. Around them, the fire began to die down, not extinguished, but running out of fuel. The grain had burned away, leaving only timber and stone. In the relative quiet, Sarah could hear voices below. Jacob calling her name, Agent Crawford shouting orders, Emma Hartwell crying for her teacher. "They'll dig us out," she told Morrison. "The town won't leave us here. Even though you're a criminal?" Sarah thought of the community gathered below, people who'd seen her at her worst, and chosen to love her anyway. "Especially because I'm a criminal. That's what families do." It took 3 hours to clear the debris. 3 hours of Sarah and Thomas Morrison sharing stories in the smoky darkness, her tale of running and hiding, his of building a life from honest work. When the rescuers finally broke through, dawn was breaking over Dakota territory. Jacob hauled her out first, his face streaked with tears and soot. "Thought I'd lost you," he whispered. "Can't get rid of me that easy." Agent Crawford waited as the town doctor examined her burns, painful but not serious. When Doc Harrison pronounced her fit for travel, Crawford approached with his shackles. "Time to finish this," he said. Sarah nodded, holding out her hands. But before the iron could close around her wrists, Thomas Morrison's voice rang out from the stretcher where they were loading him. "Agent Crawford, a word, if you please." Crawford approached the injured man. Sarah couldn't hear their conversation, but she could see Morrison's earnest face, his emphatic gestures despite the broken arm. After several minutes, Crawford returned, his expression thoughtful. "Mr. Morrison has made an interesting proposition," he said. "Seems his brother William has been looking for you two for 3 years. Not for revenge, for resolution. He wants to make a statement to federal court, testifying that the shooting was accidental, that you saved his life by getting him medical attention before you fled." Sarah's heart began to race. "What does that mean?" "It means the charges might be reduced. Bank robbery instead of attempted murder. Maybe 5 years instead of 20. Maybe probation if the judge believes in redemption." Hope was a dangerous thing, but Sarah felt it stirring anyway. "And the condition? You stay here in Millfield, both of you. Put down roots. Prove that William Morrison's faith in human nature wasn't misplaced." Sarah looked around at her community, at Emma Hartwell tugging on her mother's skirt, at Thomas Mitchell, standing patient as always beside the church, at Mrs. Peterson already organizing food for the firefighters. Her family, earned through trial and trauma, sealed with trust. "I can live with those terms," she said. Agent Crawford fastened the shackles around her wrists, not for transport to federal prison, but for the short walk to Sheriff Watson's jail, where she would wait for William Morrison's testimony and whatever mercy the federal court might offer. As they walked toward town, Emma Hartwell broke free from her mother's grip and ran to Sarah's side. "Miss Brennan, will you still be my teacher when you come back?" Sarah looked down at the child who taught her the true meaning of heroism, not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. "If they'll have me," she said. "If they'll have me." The church bell chimed 7 times, marking the dawn of a new day. Behind them, the grain elevator smoldered, like an altar where the past had finally been burned away. Ahead lay uncertainty, but also possibility, the chance to build a future on truth instead of lies. Sarah Brennan walked toward her, reckoning with her community beside her, carrying their love like a light in the darkness. Whatever came next, she would face it here, as herself, among people who'd seen her worst and claimed her anyway. The hero they'd made her into was gone, burned away in the grain elevator's flames. But the woman who remained flawed, honest, redeemed, might just be enough. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the rebuilt schoolhouse, arranging wild flowers in a mason jar on her desk. The federal court had been merciful, 3 years' probation, to be served in Millfield under Sheriff Watson's supervision. William Morrison's testimony had swayed the judge, along with letters from every family in town attesting to Sarah's character. Jacob worked now at Peterson's grain mill, his quick mind applied to honest arithmetic instead of criminal schemes. The postcard from Kansas City lay pressed between the pages of Sarah's Bible, not forgotten, but transformed from guilt into grace. Thomas Mitchell appeared in the doorway, hat in hand. "Good morning, Sarah." "Good morning, Thomas." She gestured to the flowers. "The children picked these yesterday. Said the classroom needed brightening. It's not the only thing." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "I have something for you." He withdrew a folded paper from his coat. Not marriage lines this time, but a deed. The old Morrison place. Thomas deeded it to the school district before he moved to Kansas to be near his brother. The school board voted to offer it to you, as a permanent home. Sarah read the document with wonder. Land of her own, roots put down in Dakota soil. "Thomas, I can't afford." "It's paid for. The whole town contributed. Even Agent Crawford sent $5 from Washington." She looked up at him through tears that had nothing to do with sorrow. "Why?" "Because you're ours, Sarah Brennan. Criminal past and heroic present and whatever future you choose to make. You belong here." Through the window she could see Emma Hartwell and the other children arriving for the school day, their faces bright with the promise of spring. Her students, her community, her home. Thomas held out his hand. "Shall we tell them together?" Sarah took his hand, feeling the calluses earned through honest work, the strength that came from choosing love over fear. "Yes," she said. "Let's tell them together." The church bell chimed 8 times as they walked outside to greet the children. Sarah Brennan, teacher, hero, redeemed sinner, was home at last. If something in this story touched you, linger with us. We'll handle the rest.